Hey everybody, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to play two opponents. They're not particularly great opponents, winning players, and I think that's actually good because we're going to learn perhaps more from what they do wrong rather than what I do right. So let's get on with it. I haven't played this guy before, Saxon Big Dog. At the start of the match, as you know, my only goal is to find out what his playing style is and see how I can exploit that. So King Jack, and I limp. A lot of people are going to raise on this. Some people like to raise at the start of a match in order to get a feel for their opponent. I like to limp and see what he does. I have the theory that you can hear more if you're not actually talking and if you're listening, and I consider limping to be more like listening and betting to be like talking. So we hit middle pair here, and he checks. I bet just to get a feel for him. He folds. He hasn't raised from his big blind. Folds the first bet, and obviously not many hands in, only the first hand, but I'm still thinking quite possible that we have a tight opponent. And I think you might better hear a rooster in the background. I'm sorry about that, not much I can do. Alright, limping. And once again I want to get a feel for how he's playing. And he folds the ace queen 6 flop. Pretty good flop to attack because he's limped, therefore I'm going to put aces out of his range generally, and I can represent the ace or the queen. So two hands in, looking pretty tight, and my strategy against tight players is I'm going to attack pretty much every flop that I can, get them to fold too many, and if they sort of play back at me, then I'll get out of their way generally. Here he min raises. Not a big fan of the min raise. It's given me 3-1 to call, plus whatever he's got behind, so pretty much 70, whatever it is, 73-1 on my call here. And I completely miss. He bets 2/3, or 3/4 of the pot, and that's a pretty standard continuation bet, and I'll just fold that. Alright, he's limping, not very aggressive pre-flop. His only aggression was to sort of make a min raise, so this guy looks pretty tight and passive. I bet out and pick up the pot, and I would bet this out even if I didn't have the 7. I'm not really betting my 7, I'm just betting because I know that he'll fold too often. Queen 3, I'm playing all of my cards pre-flop against a passive opponent. Here he bets, and to me that seems quite suspicious. I would think that if he had the king or the jack, considering how passive he's been, he would check. And my plan is to call him and float him on the turn. So I do that. He checks the turn, and now I try and take it down with a 40 bet. Perhaps I should have bet a bit more. He calls, and now I'm not really quite sure what's going on. I thought I had a good read on him. Ace on the river, and I folded up, and he had the flush draw, so I was 100% correct that his bet on the flop was basically FOS, meaning rubbish, and only because he picked up a draw on the turn was my float not successful. And then once he knew that he couldn't win the hand, he put out a nice bluff on the river. So I know that he's capable of bluffing and sort of stabbing at pots, but otherwise generally seems quite tight. So I had a good read, I made a good play, didn't work. Perhaps you can say he outplayed me. Alright, bet the paired board, get called, and I'm not really happy about that. And he bets just 20 on the river. This looks like a 7 to me from a pretty weak player, so I'll let him have that. Okay, Queen 3, once again limping, and And now I've actually hit something good. I bet as usual. I get called. 2 is a great card for me. I mean, if I was ahead on the flop, which obviously I think I was, I'm definitely still ahead now. So, just betting to get a little bit of value. 60, not trying to go silly and bet pot or something. Board's not too drawy. I'm not too worried. And he calls. 5 on the river. Pretty hard to imagine this called anything from the flop where the 5 will sort of make him a great hand. This is looking like a really good board. And now I'm just trying to think about how much value I can get. I've got to keep in mind that it's pretty hard for him to have much. We might have a 10 or something here. And I bet 140, maybe that's a little bit greedy. In hindsight, perhaps 90 or 100 might have been better, simply because, it's hard for him to have much. And he folds. So perhaps I missed a little value on the river, perhaps not. Here he 4x's pre-flop, and I'm not really sure what that means. While he's generally tight post-flop, I mean, that's kind of an erratic raise. So I'll keep my eye out to see how often that happens, but obviously I'm going to fold. Still limping. And I hit bottom pair. This time I check it. Not really sure if that's a great check. And he bets on the turn. I call with my 3. He could be betting a lot of draws. 100 on the river, and yeah, not much I can do there. Maybe I would have been better off betting that out, but it's not the sort of flop that most people will fold either. Min raise, calling all min raises, and 120 into an 80 pot. Good luck to you, sir. And he bluffed me, so yes, we know he's capable of bluffing, and I'll be keeping that in mind later on. So, bet the paired board. I like betting paired boards against tight guys. He folds. And he folds again there. Here I'd make my first raise of the match, just a min raise, just to see what he does. And he min raises me back. Whenever I see this, I think to myself, this guy's a fish. I mean, he's given me terrific odds to call. There's 100 in the pot already, and it only cost me 20 to call, so obviously I will. And I hit the monster flop, which is, obviously this isn't happening too often, but he's giving me the odds to call and suck out on what's obviously a better hand than 5-6, so terrible play from him. Bets 100, and I think, considering that he's got a little bit of bluff in him, I'm just going to give him some rope, let him hang himself. Flat call, 4 on the turn. Probably not the greatest card for me. I'd rather see something like a queen or a king, or a jack or an ace, something he can represent. 140, and I'm in raise just for value. Try and get him to call. I don't think I'm getting much more here, unless a high card comes. A 3 on the river's pretty awful, and I bet 300 into the 880 pot, 340 into the 880 pot, and that's just trying to get some value, obviously, and he folds. Alright, the 4x raise, it looks like it's a bit emotional. When he loses a hand, he makes a raise after that. And once again he's doing it, so perhaps a little bit annoyed. And now he min raises again. I hate the min raise. And I've flopped a really good hand, obviously 3 of a kind, but it's also a bit vulnerable with the 6, 7, 8, a pretty drawy board. So I check letting him bet, and I'm going to play this pretty quickly. Raise it to 320. I'm happy to get the chips in. I just want to make him pay if he's got some sort of hand like maybe ace 5 or ace 9 or even ace 10, something like that, or any of those hands, the 5, the 4 possibly if he's got a gut shot, the 9 or the 10. So that's why I'm raising so aggressively there. Queen on the turn, looks like a very good card. And once again, making him pay if he wants to call some sort of draw. And he decides I'm serious and folds. Alright, 2-7, I'm going to fold that. Normally I'd play it, but he's just taken a beat on a couple of hands, and he's shown that he gets emotional when that happens and starts raising sort of silly amounts, so I'm not going to limp. And here he limps. Not the sort of board I'm going to attack, though he is a tight player. And we pick up a lot of draws here. I'm not really into semi-bluffing. I mean, if he does have a 7, then, you know, not such a great time for me to bet. I'd rather play this passively and sort of check here. If he bets, I'll probably call up to a pot-sized bet, knowing that if I hit my jack or 7, I mean, it's just going to be Christmas against this sort of guy. And a 3 on the river. Hand hasn't worked out too well, and he wins with his queen 3, no problem with that. King queen, make a min raise to try and control him. Not a great flop. He bangs out 120 into the 80 pot. This is the sort of situation where a lot of players go wrong. First of all, I've got no hand, i.e. I have got no pair. Second of all, I've got no draw, and as you've heard me say in my videos before, or if you've done coaching with me, no hand, no draw, no call, or else you end up with no chips. So I'm just going to throw this away. King queen is a good hand pre-flop. It's not a good hand right now. It's king high, and I'm not committing chips on king high. Alright, he limps, and here I've got a double gut shot. It's pretty passive. I bet and take it down. And I check this. I don't know why. Perhaps I should have bet it. Now I've got sort of a draw, but, you know, I'm not really that interested. I'm looking for better spots than that. He raises min. We've talked about sort of how horrible I think the min raise is. It's given me great odds. So I'm going to call even on king 2. Flop top pair. Poker's an easy game when you do that all the time. I flat. Obviously I'm not folding top pair there, even to a pot-sized bet. And the ace on the turn is such a horrible card. I really hate that card. But he checks, luckily. 7 on the river. He might be trapping me, but I'm just going to try and block him. And against weak players like this, a blocking bet will work. So I bet 19 to 360 pot. And he folds. So blocking bets will work against weak players. Here I hit bottom pair, kind of drawy board, and I'm just going to check behind. And I bet on the turn for value and pick up a beautiful 10 on the river. Not going to get carried away. This is kind of a bet fold because a lot of draws have been completed. So I bet 60. He calls on the 8. And at the start of the video I was talking about making money off our opponent's mistakes. Here he's hit middle pair, hasn't protected it, hasn't bet. If he bet this on 2 streets I would have folded my 6. And that's cost him 120 of his chips. Alright, queen 9, we're still limping, and he bets. Just going to fold. No need to get in the marginal spots against these guys. Now he shoves. You know, that's fine. I kind of think of his shoving when he's low stacked as kind of like a fish beached up on a fish that's been beached on the sand. He's thrashing around trying to get something to happen, but if I'm patient, then, you know, his end is coming. Alright, I'd limp ace queen here because he shoved the previous hand. And if he's going to shove this one, then obviously I'm going to snap call. So I'm giving him the chance to do something stupid, which he declines. Not a great flop. Could bet it, but just going to play passively. And he bets on the river. He can have that. 7-9. Once again, I'm calling his raise because he's giving me odds to do so. Still getting more than 20 to 1 on it. He checks. Now I've picked up a gut shot. Just going to check it. Ace on the river. And he checks down Jack 3. So if he's been raising on junk, I'm going to call him on junk. Limping my ace jack. If he shoved here, I'd probably snap him off. And bet out, take down the pot. And here he shoves. And, I mean, I was trying to catch him. He's had some good timing. I limped ace queen, he didn't shove. I limped ace jack, he didn't shove. But, you know, we will get there eventually. Limping with king queen. Probably not really happy about limping king queen here because I don't want him to shove. I can't really call with king queen. I'd probably rather raise to prevent him shoving. But it works out well. I pick up second pair with a backdoor flush draw. And I'm going to play this deceptively by checking. King on the turn looks like a pretty good card. and I bet full pot. I get called. 9 on the river looks beautiful, especially when he bets 210. I'm really putting him on a 9 here more than a king. And I shove all in, hoping to get called by the 9, but it turns out he was slow playing a king as well. So a little bit bizarre, but no harm done. Alright, he raises, min raises, king jack obviously I'm calling. Hit top pair, which I've done quite a lot. I run good in this match. And I'm betting because he's checked just to get value. I think my top pair is probably good here. Could get called by all sorts of draws and worse hands. He calls. Jack on the river. I mean, obviously it looks like a good card, but it does complete draws if he had queen 10 or 7-10, which, does happen. So I'm not betting too aggressively. Just 90 for some value, and he folds. So obviously I wasn't getting anything if he's not calling 90. And bet the paired board. It's always profitable against tight guys, even tight spewy ones like this. Shove again, and he's avoided all my good hands very well. Fold my 6-3. Here we've got Jack 5 suited, and I bet on my flush draw. I'd rather bet my draws against a passive opponent because he'll probably fold anyway, and if my draw does hit, that's an extra bonus. And ace on the turn, I make a really weak bet here, and if I was playing against me, I'd be automatically raising this bet because it looks weak. He flat calls, and honestly I put him on a 4 here, possibly a queen. I don't think I'm pushing him off, so I just don't bother bluffing, give it up. And he had the 4, but he was calling a river bet, I think. Especially on my line where I didn't look very strong. Here we get a draw, and this time I'm checking it because he saw me bet my draw last time. And there's a good chance if I do bet, he might raise me knowing that I bet last time on a draw, and a raise looks like a good idea. So I've changed my line there, where I would normally bet my draws. Here I check it. So I've hit second pair, and I bet it. And the 8 is actually a pretty horrible card, the 8 of hearts. But I get a bit greedy and bet anyway, and he folds. Alright, ace-6, he raises min, obviously I call. Miss the flop. Bets pot, and he can have it, no problem. Limp, and he bets. This is pretty weak play from me here. I just flat call with my trying to hit the queen. I don't think it's good, and he's pricing me in, and then I have to fold it up. I mean, not the greatest of play at all, really. I mean, I guess I was kind of getting odds, but not a very strong line I chose. He folds pre-flop. Jack, and because he's been shoving so much pre, just limping, trying to trap him. And I'm kind of glad I limp now that it's such a horrible flop. He bets 40. I can't fold my Jack here, but I'm not going to go raising him. Diamond on the turn, so if he was betting any sort of draw, it probably just hit. 40 more, and then 40 on the river and getting great odds, in case he does have something like a 5, and he's got king 8. So I'm not really unhappy with the way I played that. Obviously, if I raised pre-flop, I might have folded him out. Then again, he might have called, and then I've lost a bigger pot. So, against a guy that's shoving quite a lot, I'm quite happy that I limped my Jack. Alright, he limps. I've got 10-3. Once again, bet the paired board, take down the pot. Easy game. And he raises 4x, not calling my 5-3 offsuit. And I bet and take down the pot. So tight guys, I bet quite a lot, though I haven't been doing it too much against this guy. And here we've hit top pair with a sort of a gut shot to the wrong end of the straight. So I'm betting this. King I don't think looks like a bad card. I mean, a bad card would be obviously an 8 or a 9 and possibly a 4 and possibly a spade. So I'm going to bet a little bit aggressively here. And he calls me, and he fires out 160 on the river. And this is, for a start, I think that he's FOS. I'm definitely calling him here, which I'll show you the result first. So I call, and he's got a busted, horrible straight draw. But this is exactly the sort of board that I would not try and bluff. And the reason is it's so obvious that there are so many missed straights and flushes and so on, that when you bet it on the river, I mean, that was his only chance to take it down, but it's pretty obvious that the weak sort of line he took, he's probably on a missed straight or flush draw, and it's a very easy call for me. So if you're in this situation, I would probably, against a half-decent opponent, I wouldn't bother bluffing. They'll snap call you on all sorts of hands. Pretty light. Alright. 10-2, and he checks. I don't think I'm going to bother trying to have a stab at this now that I have it on the flop. Check it down, and my 10 high is good. And once again, talking about his mistakes, if he bets his draw here, which he should do against an opponent that has not been that aggressive, then I will simply fold. So it's kind of a semi-bluff in a sense, I guess, and he misses out on yet another pot because he didn't bet. Alright, I limp with my 10-2 again, and he min-raises 10-2, horrible hand, I'm calling for the odds. He's still giving me, what, about 14-1 there. Bottom pair, he shoves, and now I've got a bit of a tough decision, but basically there's two likely scenarios. One, he has an overpair, or two, he has overcards, considering he's low stacked. So I think I'm calling here. If he does have an overpair, I've got outs, and if he does have overcards, I'm ahead. Considering his stack size, I'm going to call. And he made a pretty ordinary play on Queen 8. I've just got to hold. 9, that's a good card. And 10 on the river, which I obviously didn't need. And that's the end of the match. So as I said, I'm going to do one more, and I'll just take a break and load that up. Okay, here we are in our second match. A guy that I haven't played before, and he limps pre, so if he's not raising, it's a good sign. Assume he's not too aggressive. And I take a stab. This is a sort of board, obviously I'll stab ace 10 for. He folds, so I'm starting to think perhaps he's tight. And he checks, I'll take another stab. This time he calls. Could well have a king or a jack here or a draw. And that's a pretty horrible river. And he called an ace 5. Pretty loose call there. So, obviously, probably not as tight as I thought, but perhaps passive. I was, possibly confusing passive with tight. Right, he raises, min raise, and I always call these, of course. And 10 on the turn, calling that. And if he does have an ace, he'll probably bet big here, if he's been trapping me. But just for 20, of course, I'm going to call him with my 10 here. And he had jack 10. Pretty horrible play. If he had have bet the flop, he'd have won the hand. I mean, he's raised pre-flop, he can represent the ace. So his sort of passive play there cost him the pot, and we end up splitting it. Right, limping Queen 8. And paired board, we always bet. Take it down. Min raise again from him. This time I've hit middle pair. He checks. The ace I really hate. And he checks it again. And 9 of hearts on the river. I think I just checked this. I'm not even going to bother blocking him. And my 7 was good there. Alright, this time he 3x's us after we limp. So we'll let him win that pot, and I'll keep that in mind. If people are constantly 3xing or 4xing, then I have a strategy against that. And that is that I'll be raising the hands which I don't really want to play for sort of 3 or 4x. I'll be taking the initiative, trying to get them to fold. And if I do have a hand, I'll be trying to limp, trap them, sort of, get them to raise. Alright, he bets 20 into this, and hasn't raised pre-flop. I think I'm just going to push him off it, be a bit of a bully, and I get the easy fold. Alright, and again, here we come to jack 3, I limp, And that looks like a pretty nice flop. I bet 20, he raises me. He's been pretty passive. He could well have a jack here. He could also have a 4, a pair above 4s, 5, 6, 7s, etc., or a flush draw. And if he doesn't have the jack, obviously I'm ahead at this stage, I'd expect 120 on the turn. He could be running a bluff. Ace on the river, and he bets pot. Ugh. I'm not feeling so good about my kicker here. Could he be bluffing? Unlikely. But if he is bluffing, another possible hand that people will bluff here is ace-x, because the ace is often good. And I'm probably going to look him up here, which I do, and he shows me a better jack. Not really a big surprise. Kind of tough lay down there, and I just wasn't good enough to make it, even with no kicker. So, feeling like a bit of a fish after that play. Get raised here. It's a min raise, which I think is just awful. And I flat call it. If he did min raise me on a draw, he's probably just got there. And obviously after I've been min raised, I'm shutting down. And he min raised with his top pair there. I think he should have raised a bit more heavily. It's fine to min raise when you've got 3 of a kind. Then you're not too worried about your 3 of a kind getting outdrawn on. But when your top pair is a 7, the min raise is pretty awful. You should be betting more aggressively to protect it. Alright, limp with 5-5. And I check this for whatever reason. Normally I bet on this flop. Now I bet on the turn, get called. And he called me on Queen 10, so pretty random call there. He's definitely passive, as I said, but not necessarily tight. And he bets pot here. He can have it, no problems. Top pair. Betting, get called. Good chance my top pair is still good. He hasn't raised me, which he's done every time he's had top pair or a good hand, so I'm going to bet 60 on the turn. And he gives it up. And bottom pair I bet, get called, hasn't raised me, so probably doesn't have top pair. And now, the bet of 20 I really don't like. Looks to me like a 9 or something. I just call in case I can suck out. And I'm not even going to call the 20 on the river. Even though I'm getting fantastic odds, I just don't think I'm ahead. Okay, bet into the paired board again. He calls, and I have to give it up. So, as I said, this guy's passive, but not really that tight. Here I raise 120 for value. Try and annoy him a little bit too, see how that works. And he limps, bet again, get called again. And now I'm trying to represent something. I mean, I know he's calling me way too widely. The ace is a sort of hand, or a sort of card that I can represent. So I fire a second barrel, and he folds. So he looks like the sort of guy that's going to call a barrel, and then perhaps give up if I show some aggression, which is nice. Limp on ace 3, hit top pair, he folds. And bet out the paired board again. This time he folds. I think he learned his lesson when I fired that second barrel. And he's going to 3x me. If he's going to be doing this a lot, then obviously I'll be changing my strategy. He hasn't gone overboard so far. And fold it up, no hand, no draw. And once again another paired board. And now that we've fired that second barrel, he seems to have slowed down on calling those, which is nice. We can pick them up pretty easily. This is not the sort of paired board I'm going to bet. Just the size of the cards I don't like. I.e. the 7-7-9, I think I'm getting called by too many draws. And he had the ace, he would have called me for sure. So good timing there. Limp on my 5-3, another paired board. I actually didn't notice how many paired boards there were in this match when I was playing it. Alright, we've got top pair, flat called, 2 I don't like, so I'm just betting passively to try and get a feel for him. He's not the sort of guy that's going to put a move on me too often, I don't think. And 90 on the river, which he folds to. Once he doesn't raise me on the 2, I'm feeling confident. Limp maze, queen, I know everyone's raising on this, but he's been 3xing me a lot, and my plan was to trap with the strong hand. And here we've hit a lovely flop. He bets pot. There's now 360 in the pot, which is pretty much a third of my stack. So I don't think I'm just going to be flat calling when there's a third of my stack sitting there and I shove. I expect to get called on hands like Queen Jack, Queen 9, King Queen, and possibly some of the other hands like King Jack, obviously, if he's got a draw, 2 hearts, and he in fact does insta-call me on Ace 10, so he's got middle pair, an overcard he thinks, which is in fact not an overcard, and a backdoor flush draw. I'm still a huge favourite, of course, and it blanks off, and I'm in the lead. Alright, another paired board, which I bet and to pick up. He does the 3x trick again, not calling him on Ace 2. And he bets pot there. He can have it. Now I've taken the lead. I'm kind of backing off a little bit, just waiting for the right spot. So I haven't hit any boards, going through a bit of a dry patch, and just playing a little bit passively here. Make sure he settles down. And here's a nice hand, King Jack. Horrible flop, he bets. Once again, overcards, but no hand, no draw, so no call. And it's not really the sort of board I want to float. Here's an interesting spot. I bet 40. He shoves on me, and people often do this with combo draws, but they will also do it with 2 pair. So I've got a gut shot, an overcard, and top pair against the guy. That's pretty awful. I mean, this is a very close spot. I can never be really too far behind, and probably never too far ahead, and I elect for once just to fold it and move on. I feel I've got a pretty big edge. I'm not going to get into a marginal spot. And here he's raised pre-flop, which I call, and he checks the flop, not the sort of flop you think he's going to hit. I fire out, try and pick it up, and that's a pretty good card. I'm going to fire out on the turn again, and he's going to have a very hard time calling this if he's got something like Ace 9, Ace 10, Ace Jack. So the second barrel, this is the position where I will fire a second barrel. He's raised, meaning he's got most likely big cards. And pick up that pot, that was really nice. And here we've got 2 pair. I'm going to try and look weak and try and get into raise. So I just bet 40, hoping he'll come over the top. 2 of spades on the turn, not my favourite card in case he had a flush draw, but looking weak again, trying to encourage some aggression, and he folds it. Alright, King 3. He bets, hasn't raised pre-flop, which makes me think it's a little bit unlikely he's got an ace there. So I'm coming over the top of him, trying to put him under some pressure. Really don't think he's got an ace, I just think he's basically FOS. And he folds. So I made a play on that board because it looked right. Alright, he's doing his 3x trick again. Limps this one. Here I've got a gut shot and an overcard. I'm just going to play it quietly. I've kind of been aggressive in spots against this guy, and luckily I win that. Might have bet it, might have worked out better, but I think that was okay. Here I'm in racing just to slow him down, and he actually folds to it. That's lovely. And he limps. He's pretty low here. And generally when people are low, I like to put pressure on them. Pretty easy when you've hit top pair on the turn. He folds it, and once again, putting pressure on him, another paired board. He calls, yuck, and by some miracle, my jack is good against his 8-10, lucky I didn't hit the jack. And here he's got, 11, 12 big blinds roughly, and I think I'm just going to shove my pocket pair. The 80 chips that are in the middle is a significant portion of his stack, and I don't think he's going to have anything big. I think he's going to be folding most of the time. I don't really want to get it all in on a pocket pair because he'll either have a high pocket pair or overcards, but I think this is okay. He calls me with 10-5, pretty awful call, and we're off to the races. And nice flop, good turn, just got to dodge the 6 outs on the river, which I do. So that's the end of that game. And that's the end of this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. And there's a few interesting spots in it. Really, you can probably pick up as much from how badly my opponents played. I mean, playing a little bit too passively. as well as a few nice plays that I made as well. So as I said, hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you run good until the next video.